What's up everyone, Alex here. Back in 2011, a little game called Skyrim came out. It was released to critical acclaim, so naturally, I was excited to play it. But when I finally did, I encountered so many little annoying bugs that distracted me from seeing what other people saw in it. And even years later, many of its fans are still able to excuse its faults because the game was just so good. Fast forward to 2024, and I'm seeing a different set of issues with Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, which is one of the most anticipated games of the year. But something different happened here, because the more I played of 100 Heroes, the more I was able to excuse its faults, many of which have something to do with my own expectations. That said, before we can even see the silver lining, I want to take you through the very real challenges that I faced, one of which completely prevented me from even starting the game. But let's back up for a second here. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes is a turn-based JRPG designed by the creators of Suikoden, developed by Rabbit & Bear Studio, and published by 505 Games, who provided me with both a PlayStation and Switch key and is sponsoring this video. At the time of its launch, Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes became one of the most successfully funded Kickstarters, hitting every single stretch goal they put forth, making it one of the highest funded JRPGs on said platform. The game puts you in the role of Noah, a young member of the Watch who sets out on an expedition alongside an Imperial officer named Sane, as they look for a magical artifact known as the Primal Lens. Their friendship is soon tested as the flames of war tear them apart, pitting them and their friends against each other in conflict as they become tools of larger ambitions driven by greed and war, forcing them to re-examine their morals and beliefs as war wages onward. Now, before we get into the review proper, I want to point out that I've never finished any of the Suikoden games before. My parents never bought the game for me, and as an adult, I just never found the time and place to sit down and finish them. That being said, I approached Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes from the perspective of being a retro-style JRPG with modern conveniences. And as I soon found out, this was absolutely the wrong headspace to approach this game with. As I said, my experience with Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes didn't start off great. One of the perils of receiving a game early is that these products are still being actively worked on, with the developers working hard to get it ready for release. This is the reason why I was unable to play the PS5 version of the game. But I also want to point out that 505 Games and Rabbit Bear Studios have been nothing but incredible at being involved and solving the issue I raised here, and were gracious enough to provide me with a Switch key. While the Switch version started fine, which was a whopping 28GB install by the way, I was greeted by lower frame rates that made me question if this was the right platform to attempt my playthrough. Its opening movie made it apparent to me that this might be a rough go. So that was the point that I decided to install the PS4 version on my PS5, which is the version that I wound up reviewing. What you're seeing on screen right now is a comparison between the Switch, PS4, and PS5 versions of the game's opening intro, and needless to say, the PS5 version runs the game the best out of all three. After finally being able to start the game, I started noticing a few weird things while playing. For starters, saving on the world map, which is a staple of many JRPG games during the PS1 era, is nowhere to be found. Instead, Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes only lets you save at inns and save points. This one omission actually caused quite a bit of friction during the first several hours of the game for me. One such example happened when I had just finished a pivotal scene in the game. I thought to myself, I'm just gonna pick up the main quest in town and head on over to where the mission is since I can probably save there. Instead, I was greeted with a lengthy cutscene, which led to an entire playable section where I couldn't save at all. The only time that I was able to save was when I had finally left that area and got back to town, roughly about 30 or so minutes later. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes does feature autosaves, which activate upon reaching certain checkpoints. That said, the game doesn't actually tell you when an autosave is created, leaving you to wonder what the checkpoint criteria is and when it actually saves. I don't rely a lot on autosaves to begin with, but 100 Heroes implementation certainly didn't help endear me to the idea. Part of this save game frustration is exacerbated by the fact that much of 100 Heroes UI animations feels a bit slow and unresponsive at times. This is highly evident when you start combat, when you have to wait until all of the UI elements slide into place and a pointer cursor finally shows up on screen. This might sound like a small nitpick, but given how many other turn-based JRPGs make sure that their UI shows up quickly to give players control right away, this slows the pace of combat drastically, as you have to do this for every single turn. The game's lack of fast-forward functionality also highlights the fact that its combat animations are a bit slower than modern games, leaving you waiting a ton until the next time you're able to input your commands. 100 Heroes asks you to input all of your party's commands first, after which the turn plays out based on the order in the timeline shown. While 100 Heroes' encounter rate isn't too aggressive, it does creep up on you at the most inopportune times, more specifically during times when you're trying to solve a puzzle or two. And to hammer an earlier point home, nope, these puzzle areas typically don't have save points nearby either. And good luck trying to attempt to flee from battle, because you'll be subject to both the slower combat and UI animations if you fail, forcing you to endure watching your opponents take slow potshots at you, and then wait until the UI slides into place and the cursor reappears. The solution I came up with was to just use the provided auto battle function instead of flee, which made me realize that many of these non-boss encounters were trivial. I figured I'd much rather earn experience rather than to have to waste my time with a failed escape attempt, and have to watch all of those slow animations unfold. And by utilizing auto battle, you won't have to deal with the UI animations playing at all, as the battle will just keep going until you either cancel it or you win the encounter altogether. There's also the issue of inventory management to deal with as well, because we all know how fun inventory management is. All of your battle items, which include your potions, weapons, armor, and runes you've picked up, all share the same inventory bag. And while your potions stack to a certain amount, every other piece of gear and rune occupy a slot each, and keep in mind that you only have 30 slots to begin with. This basically means that you'll have to deal with inventory management at every given opportunity, because if you don't and you wind up exploring a deep dungeon, many of the treasure chests you'll come across won't open and reveal their contents unless you clear up space in your bag. This puts a quick stop to the fun of finding new treasure chests to loot in your dungeon runs, so make sure you only carry the essentials with you. Thankfully, the game does let you discard items whenever you win loot from battles, so it's a bit curious that treasure chests don't just invoke the same interface. Apart from the things that I mentioned, I want to point out a few other things that I noticed during my playthrough that are worth mentioning. Depth of field, which blurs the background to create the illusion of depth, is a bit too aggressive in certain areas. You can toggle this feature off on PC, but you cannot turn this off on consoles. The quest objective marker oftentimes point at the wrong place, and there's at least one instance in the game that I've encountered that doesn't have translations. If you've gotten to this point in the review and thought to yourself, wow, this is a pretty grim review, first of all, you shouldn't have skipped to this chapter. Go back to the previous 2 chapters for context. Second of all, yes, this all does sound pretty grim, doesn't it? So it would surprise you to hear then that despite everything that I've mentioned here, that I wound up loving Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, to the point that I'd even say that it's one of my favorite JRPGs this year. I recall having this change of heart after a pivotal point in the story. Despite the knowledge that both Noah and Ryan's stories were going to diverge from one another, that still didn't prepare me for the sheer fact that the characters I'd traveled with had grown with me, and their plights became my own. In fact, this knowledge merely served to make me anxious, knowing full well that this friendship will be broken by outside forces beyond their control. And when I realized this, I pondered all of the criticisms I lobbed at the game and asked a few questions. Did all of these criticisms collectively make my experience of the game lesser than others? Is it so wrong to try to design a game to adhere to a moment in time when all of our modern conveniences weren't thought of? The answer that I came up with was that while Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes design decisions can feel inconvenient at times, players who can really dedicate time to the game won't find these much of an issue. And when you consider the very real fact that Rabbit and Bear Studios have been working tirelessly to address every single bug that every single press person, content creator, and early access backer has reported to them, I'm confident that by the time you actually get your hands in the game, that the bugs that I've mentioned, and many others, will have been addressed. And if not, they won't rest until all of them have been squashed. These statements effectively wipe the slate clean for me, which allows us to focus on the many things that Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes did to turn my opinion around. In case you didn't know, the 100 Heroes moniker isn't just a cool subtitle. It also describes the massive amount of characters who can join your party. There are two types of characters in 100 Heroes: battle and support. Battle characters can, as the name implies, be an active part of combat, battling enemies, or even providing healing, buffs, and debuffs. You can have 6 characters in your battle party, split between a front and back row. All battle characters have assigned ranges, from short to long. This affects placement greatly, as characters with short-range attacks assigned to the back row, for example, cannot attack enemies from that position. Your party also has a slot for a single support spot, which can be used to augment your party with new features. These features range from allowing you to change your party composition at save points to increasing the amount of a specific resource you obtain, among others. One really cool feature of 100 Heroes is the attendant feature. This allows you to bank any required party members so that they can still be part of your party without being active battle participants, freeing up space should you wish to level up other characters. Hilariously, this leads to unintentionally funny moments, such as this screenshot of a stealth section in the game where the entire party is stealthily trying to avoid this guard's attention. Going back to the characters, I just absolutely love the variety showcased in 100 Heroes. And while some might feature cringy voice acting, I thought that for the most part, the English voice acting in the game is really good. While many will be tempted to compare the quality of its voice acting with other more recent games, I do have to bring up the fact that 100 Heroes has an incredibly huge cast, which rivals that of many other high-budget Western RPGs. And given its lower budget and asking price, I'd say that 100 Heroes gets the job done pretty well, all things considered. And of course, there's always the option to change the voice language to Japanese, should you prefer. I also want to point out that the overall story is well written, and the lines of dialogue really match the personalities of all of the game's characters. The writers, in conjunction with its voice acting, really help sell the many personalities and characters you meet in 100 Heroes. And with 100 different characters, each with their own unique styles of speech and inflection, I can't help but be impressed by the sheer size and consideration that its writers have had to think about to portray the game's characters properly. That said, because the game does have 100 heroes, some characters will naturally feel very tropey. Despite that, every character offers something new to the party, with their individual strengths and weaknesses laid bare during combat, or even outside of it. And what's great about all of this is that some characters will often chime in during main story conversations to offer a quip or two. It doesn't happen often, but this is far more than what last year's Octopath Traveler 2 did to acknowledge the existence of its other party members during the main story, and it's certainly welcome in this game with its massive cast. While much has been said about the speed of battle in 100 Heroes, I do want to touch upon how every single boss battle in the game has a gimmick that you'll have to pay attention to. And to be perfectly blunt, I love these. These gimmicks create a clear delineation between the regular enemies that you face elsewhere and the bosses themselves, making these encounters feel a ton more special as a result. I also love me some puzzles in my games, so trying to figure out how to make these gimmicks work for you, all the while engaging in 100 Heroes' combat system, was just an absolute treat. These puzzles also extend to its dungeons, which may frustrate some players expecting a more straightforward experience. That said, I was really surprised by how taken I was with all of the puzzles that I came across, and how it encouraged me to want to explore as much of each dungeon as I could, inventory bag willing of course. That aside, I do wish that the game lowered the encounter rate a bit while engaging in some of its puzzles, as the recurring battles tend to distract too much from trying to figure out what's needed of you during these sections. Speaking of dungeoning and exploration, while I've made mention of the game's highly aggressive depth of field blurring effect before, outside of this post-processing snafu, the rest of the game looks gorgeous, with its character sprites taking me back to that bygone PS1 era. Even though I'd never played through Suikoden until the end, I can clearly see its inspirations in the way that its sprites have been designed and animated. And while some might say that the contrast between these sprites and the environment is a bit too much, I say that it's just the right amount. After all, if the goal is to capture the spirit of PS1 games, this contrast clearly exemplifies that. But perhaps the biggest, most important part of Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes that keeps me coming back to it despite my frustrations is its ability to surprise and, at the same time, hint at things to come. After getting through the initial hours of the game, 100 Heroes starts showing off new gameplay features that I didn't know it had before, unfolding alongside a plot that's careening towards a then unknown and exciting conclusion. New characters are constantly being introduced at every opportunity, with small hints of others joining the party later on. Whether it's the story, its characters, or a brand new gameplay feature, 100 Heroes offers so much more than what it shows in the beginning. One feature in particular that I am absolutely obsessed with is its base building mechanic. I've mentioned plenty of times before that I am a huge fan of any JRPG that lets me build a base, and 100 Heroes has you doing so by having you collect the necessary resources and recruiting the right characters in order to maintain and upkeep the many different facilities that your kingdom requires. It's a very small diversion from the main story, but one that I feel matches its overall tone. And what's more is that however much work and effort you put into this portion of the game will pay dividends the further you get into its story, making all of this a highly rewarding experience. While I'm sitting here thinking about how I want to close out this review, I'm reminded of my experience approaching the game expecting it to be an old school looking game with modern conveniences. And yes, I know that I harped on this a lot in this review already, but when I try to think of the one takeaway or lesson that I had while playing this game is that managing expectations is very, very important. Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes isn't like Octopath Traveler 2. Heck, it's not even pretending to be anything modern. And anyone looking at their Kickstarter and reading through their goals and ambitions will find that abundantly clear. But what it does offer, and something that it excels at extremely well, is its ability to take you back to a much simpler time, back when games could have mildly frustrating design choices that, in reality, makes you realize just how far JRPGs have come since then. To call Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes a time machine of sorts is by no means inaccurate, as every fiber of its being feels very much like those early pioneer days when games like Suikoden would come out and try anything and everything under the sun, delighting and surprising fans with its offerings, while carving a spot for itself in the pantheon of JRPGs. In the end, I now get why Skyrim fans are quick to excuse its faults, because a game like Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes can come along and turn all of these little nitpicks into nothing, as it takes you on this memorable journey, the likes of which you haven't experienced in a very long time. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.